These are the concluding slides from today's lecture. These are preparation slides to the seminars that will be taking place next week. The seminar activity will be looking at how we can visually plan the project. So we are talking about planning. Projects can be very complex in their nature. So we need to think about the best way we can represent these plans. The best way to represent these plans are sometimes a visual method. We discussed one method such as Gantt charts today. It's a very good visual method of project management. For this module, we're going to use PERT diagrams. PERT diagrams stand for Project Evaluation and Review Technique charts, and they allow us to represent far more data than a Gantt chart would offer. So there are various tools that we can use and techniques. We discussed work breakdown structure when we were talking about my house move, about breaking down larger tasks into smaller tasks so we can manage it more succinctly. We talked about Gantt charts. We did mention PERT diagrams. We didn't really mention critical path, but critical path was mentioned in the YouTube video about Egypt, and we will be mentioning critical path later in the seminar and lecture series. We will be also discussing the need to manage cost, and we may use cost estimates, cost reporting and earned value analysis to do this. An example of work breakdown structure is this, where this is the breakdown of an intranet page. Straight away we're broken it down into 5 components: the concept, the web design, the website development, the rollout and the support. So these are our 5 tasks that we have to do. For website design, we've broken this down further, so user interface, design server setup and so on. So we're making the project easier to understand and visualize. If you imagine showing this diagram to somebody in the project team, they'll have a very clear image about the things we have to do. The main skill of a project manager is communication, and diagrams and visualizations are a very good communication tool. We could look at the Gantt chart for this project. Again, we see the concept, website design, website development, rollout and support. It's good. We're broken down into the subtasks, and we also now have a time frame. We know when we should be doing different things. If we look at the Gantt chart, we know that the concept is being worked on between the 4th of January and the 1st of February. Below that we can see there's related tasks, and this is illustrated by the arrows. We have to do the evaluation of the current system before we define the requirements of the new system, for example. I mentioned that we're going to spend a bit of time talking about PERT diagrams. Well, in the seminar task you'll be doing a PERT diagram and spending some time understanding what it means, why it's important and why it's so much better than Gantt charts. As I mentioned in the lecture today, the PERT diagram was developed for the US Navy Polaris project. This was a very complex project, many tasks, many processes, that needed to be carefully managed. So they came up with the concept of using PERT. This is an example of a PERT diagram. We can see various activities: A, D, H, J, B, E, and so on. This diagram gives us the earliest start time, the duration, and so on. So we know when we should be able to start it, we know when we should be finishing it, and the arrows illustrate the relationship. So we have to do task A before we do task D. And we have to do task D and E before we do task H. You'll also notice that there's some of the boxes in a different colour. This is what we call the critical path. The critical path of the project. This is the longest planned route through the project. So in order for the project to complete, we can't have any delays on this path. If there's a delay on the path, the project is delayed. So we need to think about exactly what we're planning. We need to think about how we're going to have milestones. We need to plan what these milestones actually are. What are we completing? Are we completing a product for the project, a physical, technical thing, or are we talking about a project product, something that we have to produce to manage the project? So we can have milestones for two different things, the project and the product. Activity or PERT diagrams come in two flavours: activity on arc and activity on node. Activity on arc is quite basic, and within the textbook you'll find some examples of activity on arc. Due to the time limitations, we're not going to spend any time looking at activity on arc, but we're going to look at activity on node. Within the seminar next week, you'll be looking at PERT diagrams and drawing an example of a PERT diagram. It's a very useful technique to have for project management. I'll see you next week in the seminars and within the lecture. Thank you.